Welcome to Identity Unboxed, where we provide mentorship and promote representation for Black professionals in the advancement of the Black community.
We are seeking guidance from exceptional Black leaders, scholars, and professionals with expertise in their respective fields.
We hope to foster a space that promotes authenticity, inclusivity, and restoration for our listeners while exploring the intersection of our personal and professional lives.
This project is a culmination of our lived experiences as young Black professionals to transform our life trajectories to overcome adversity and reach triumph.
Our intention is to inspire you on your path to discovering your purpose. All right. Well, hello, Rickey. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Season 2 of Identity Unboxed. We are so grateful to have you here to discuss defending diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. You're currently the Vice President for Minority Affairs and Diversity at the University of Washington and the University Diversity Officer. You have been working in diversity work for over 2 decades, so it's just amazing to be able to connect with you so that you can share your expertise and your insight with our listeners. But our first question for you is, would you take us back to the moment that you were an undergraduate pursuing a degree in American Studies? How did you see your education shaping your journey to becoming the Vice President for Minority Affairs and Diversity and the University Diversity Officer at the University of Washington?
Well, thank you. Thank you again for the invitation to be with you all today to talk about this important topic. Well, first, I guess it's important to share that I did not plan on majoring in American Studies when I went off to college. Actually, I went to college wanting to be a high school principal, and that was largely driven by, I had an amazing high school principal, African-American man, the first Black principal in the state of Iowa, and he saw something in me, and so and a lot of students, but he gave me lots of opportunities, and I was just impacted by that relationship. So I wanted to be that, right, for other folks. But when I went off to Iowa, started taking my education courses, I learned that in the state of Iowa, before you can get into administration, you have to teach. And while I have high esteem for teachers, I had no desire of being a teacher myself. I hold teachers in high esteem, but that wasn't my calling. And so when I learned that that was the case after that first semester, then I set about just focusing on my general education requirements. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had hoped as I took these general education requirements, I'd come across something that would be of interest, and kept taking them. And then in my junior year, my academic advisor said, if you're ever to graduate, you have to decide on a major. And at that time, still didn't know what I wanted to do, and had gotten very involved on campus, but I still was unsure what I wanted to major in. And so my advisor looked at all the courses I had taken and said, you've taken a lot of history courses, and this would be easy for you to just major in history. And I didn't have any interest in doing that. And then she asked, so have you ever heard of American Studies? And I had not, knew nothing about that major in that field. And she said, well, your history courses would fit as really history based, but you get to have a particular interest. It just has to be within the context of the United States. And I said, so could I do something like race and ethnic relations in the United States? And she said, yes. And so I said, yeah, so let's do that. And so then that's how I ended up majoring in American Studies, or the emphasis on race and ethnic relations. And that led me into taking ethnic studies courses like African American Studies, American Indian history, and the like. But as I shared, I initially was interested in administration, just at the K-12 level, not ever knowing that actually I would be doing this work at a higher education institution. And certainly never dreamed that I would be in an executive level position working with and advocating for underrepresented, underserved, marginalized communities and groups. And but certainly for my major, there was this interest, right? And so as it turns out, my studies, my lived experiences, and my passion for addressing social inequities led me to the role that I have.
Wow. Sorry, Brad.
No, I was just going to say that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I love to hear how your journey kind of evolved, how you had one idea of what you were going to do. And, through seeking that mentorship and through kind of going down your own path, it wasn't something that you saw for your future, but the universe just kind of put you there. And now here you are today, helping folks from marginalized groups at such a large institution. So I'll let you go ahead and tee on the point you're going to add.
Well, I would say that too, and I think your point is perfect. That our path is our path, right? And I think that's important for folks. Because sometimes people will have an idea of what your path should be, and sometimes we try to follow. And no, our path is our path, and so that's one important thing to note. So thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that point about how you had made that transition from wanting to pursue administration in K through 12 to then transitioning to higher education. And if you could talk us through what that decision making looked like for you, particularly when you had that amazing representation as a young, Black student, and to be able to be that now, when did that kind of change in your mindset happen about, I think I might go into the higher education space as opposed to the K through 12 space?
Well, as an undergraduate student, I was really heavily involved on campus and student activities, a host of other things. And it was through that involvement, I spent a lot of time in the office of student activities at the University of Iowa, where I did my undergrad degree. And it's interesting, at least for me, and I don't know if it was the same for you all as undergrads, as you were doing your undergraduate degrees. I never really, until it was my junior year, it's kind of where the light bulb went on for me, but I never saw people who worked at the university like that those were professions and that was their field, that was something that you could do. And part of it, right, there's no major for that, right? There's no undergraduate major. And so I was really engaged, and I spent a lot of time in the office of some activities. And I had a mentor there, and it was during my junior year. I was in her office. We were working on some things, and this light bulb just went on. I looked at her. I said, "I want to get a job like yours." It's like, wow, this is amazing. The work that you do is so important for the students that are here. And she said, well, actually, there are graduate programs for this. And she said there are different types, and she told me the differences in them. And she said, here at the University of Iowa, we have some. And she told me the two that was at Iowa. She talked about some other institutions. And then it was at that point in time that I decided that I wanted to work at a college or university in administration. And at that time, I hadn't thought about diversity. And at the time, they called it multicultural affairs. I hadn't thought about, even though if you look at a lot of the things that I did, it was always in that space. But I just wanted to work at a college or university. And so at one of the things, by the time I do graduate, this was kind of burnt, like from school. And so I knew I wasn't going to go right into graduate school. One of the things that I did know, I knew that you need to take these graduate exams, right, to prepare. And one of the best decisions I made was I took it the couple weeks after I graduated. And the reason I did that, I was still in that mindset, that study mindset, right? So that spring I was studying to take this exam. And then a couple weeks after I took it, understanding that those test scores would be good for 5 years. And so I knew that probably within 5 years, I would probably go off to graduate school. So actually, I started working right after undergrad in kind of the corporate sector, doing work, and I actually was doing really well. They wanted me to go into management, the management track. But I knew I had no passion for that really. And so after a year and a half working, because you start to amass things, that's when it said in my head that if I don't go now, I'm not going to go because, you get in the car, and so you start to amass things and then you have financial obligations. So I went back to graduate school and got a graduate degree in higher education administration with an emphasis in student affairs. And so led me in administration. Still, as I was doing some of that, I was open. Actually, I thought I probably would end up being like a dean of students. But my journey kept taking me to doing work with Black fraternities and sororities, with the Black Student Union, with other organizations of color. I just always kind of seemed to have that passion and that connection there. And so when I finished, I started looking at a variety of jobs and getting offers in student activities, Greek affairs. But the ones that resonated with me the most was doing work in multicultural affairs, now what we would call DEI. And so my very first job and the jobs ever since then have been in that space.
I love that. That's amazing. It's like such a good thing to hear because I feel like, not speaking too much for Tiana, but I feel like we have a similar experience where, wherever we're at in our professional spaces, even if we aren't directly working like in a DEI space, our like heart and our passion always goes there. And so it's amazing to hear how you went through those different routes, even in the corporate world. And then your heartstrings, no matter where you were at, it always pulled towards that work. And, that's what we find that we share in common. I wanted to take it back a little bit and ask you a question related to just your education in American studies. I remember when I came to UW for my K-12 education, I didn't learn anything really about Black history other than, Martin Luther King, the general overview of slavery. And then I got to UW and I was able to take these Black history classes, these African American history classes, and it really just opened my eyes to, so much of the nuance of, how Black people in our situations have evolved, since the inception of this country. So I wanted to ask you, did your studies impact that drive and desire to push diversity and equity and, go towards those multicultural positions in your work?
Absolutely. It was my studies, the more you learned about our history and all the things that had happened since we were brought here, many of us were brought to this country, and taking those African American studies courses in particular, we've done a couple of things. Number one, it helped instill more pride in me for who we are as a people, but also the experiences that I was having on campus too. I would say even more so than anything, really opened my eyes to a need to make things better for all students, but in particular for me at the time, it was certainly Black students. As a Black student myself, a lot of the issues that I was pushing for, advocating for, certainly had to do about Black students having access. I wanted more of us to have access to institutions like flagships like the University of Iowa or now the University of Washington, where I'm at and where you all did your degrees. Because I was seeing, I didn't think enough of us had real opportunity to get to these kinds of institutions and know the impact that they could have. But also, once we're there, the types of experiences that we were having. And overall, I had a wonderful experience, amazing experience. I loved my time at my alma mater. But when I really look back on it, it was mostly about, well, some mentors. I had some key mentors that really helped me find myself, find my way, and understand that I had great value, and that I helped make the place better by being there, and that I can even do more to help the place be better. So it was mentors, but it was really about my peers. and the connections that we had and the community that we built amongst ourselves was important. And it was important that we do that, but I also wanted and felt like it was important that we also have more people that look like us that can help at least begin to create some of that, right? Because these are large, complex places, and to leave it to students to find each other. And depending on your major, you could be one of a handful, or depending on what it maybe the only one. And then to leave it to us to try, that doesn't always happen. And I saw a lot of people that were in situations like that, and they didn't make it. They didn't stay. And so I wanted to be a part of creating more opportunities, if I could be a part of widening the door for more folks like us, but more importantly, once they got here, to being successful. That's the piece for me. I was like, and I say to my team all the time, they'll tell you, like, if students come in and they leave, not on their own volition, because like sometimes people come and they find out we don't quite have the major that they want. Actually, it's simply okay, as long as they still had a good, but they're leaving for a reason like that, to find something that really speaks to them that they can be passionate about long term. But if they leave, worse if for academic reasons, or they don't feel connected, I mean, those are the things I feel like we've failed them, right? And that's a failure for us. And so we really need to work hard to make sure that we have the support in place, that we're helping build community, so that students feel connected. And I always talk about critical links. So it's like the more places that students are connected, whether it be to a student organization, whether it be to an individual or individuals, hopefully more individuals, whether it's to an office, to their advisor, all of those things help folks feel connected and have this sense of belonging. And I know for me, I had some struggles as a student, and there were some hard times, and there were times that I could have just easily left, and there were times I thought about it. But I remember talking to staff members who later became mentors about the difficulties, and they were like, "You are not," and they would help me figure out and navigate the place. And so, if it was financial, one time it was financial, and had a advisor, she gave me a big lecture about what I should have done and why did I take so long, and I had to, listen to that, which was fine. But then she's like, "Go see this person," and she said, like people like that, and they know, and it helped me understand too that there are lots of people able and willing to help you. But we don't always know that, and not everybody is gonna be able to ask or willing to ask, and that's one of the big dilemmas for me, right? Because I see even at the University of Washington, it's uneven because some people they have a lot of self-efficacy, and they're gonna step forward, and some people just quietly they go, and you find out about it after. What? We could have helped with that, or if it was about a financial issue, we have emergency loans. There are things that we can do, but not every. So how do we get that information to folks in timely manner? So that's one of the things that I bring into my work that was really influenced by my undergraduate career.
Wow, you've brought up so many valuable points, and thank you so much for sharing your experience of enduring those struggles you had as an undergraduate and just your entire time through school, because I know for, me personally, that there were so many times where I, even considered maybe this isn't the path for me. Maybe I shouldn't pursue college. I was a first generation college graduate, and I remember so many times where I felt so isolated, but you talked about the importance of community. And that's also what really helped me as I was involved in a program for students that have been marginalized and first generation students, the Educational Opportunity Program. And that really provided me those structural supports you're talking about. And also an advisor as well, like really set me on the path I needed to be successful, because that freshman year was just so full of ambiguity and uncertainty. And just to hear you be able to share that, and that someone like you went through those similar struggles, I think is so powerful and relatable for people. And I was hoping you'd be able to speak more about your decision to actually pursue grad school, because you talked about you're working in the corporate sector, you were making that probably pretty good money, or thinking, as you move up that your earning potential is going to be pretty high. Did you ever waver about like going into public service? Because I know for people in our community, that's something that we're a little bit hesitant about, pursuing those careers that aren't going to provide us that financial stability. So would you be able to share a bit about that?
Yeah, it's certainly, there were some thoughts there. But at the end of the day, while I was good at what I was doing, I don't know, something deep down inside, just, I knew that I wouldn't be passionate, about the work. Could I do it? Yes, I was doing it, and I was being effective, and so much so. I mean, it was interesting because there was a lot of folks there with business degrees, and they're wanting these things. And it was like, um, just do your job, because people do things right. They're trying to undercut you, and like, it's not about just do your job. Like I'm doing mine. If you do your job, maybe you'll get looked at because of the quality of your work, and folks might want to put you on a management track and so forth. So thought about it, and you're right, and thought less about it then. As I will tell you, sometimes when things get crazy, I think about it now. To 20-something years, I was like, where might I have been, and what kind of salary would I probably be commanding now? But then I come back to it, and I was like, I've never been driven by just the money, or if that was the driver. Now we saw, certainly in recent years, but it's been for a while now, that corporate sector have created chief diversity officer positions. I've had outreaches. Certainly, some of what they're offering a lot more lucrative than what we're paid in higher ed. But I know what you're able to do and the way that you do it, that I wouldn't be passionate about it. So have stayed in higher ed, just because there's something about, for me, working with young people who come in, from all walks of life, so eager, ready to change the world, and just to see the growth, and then seeing some folks who come in that, I know, to be honest, sometimes you meet people and they seem so fragile in where they are, and like, well, I don't know if she's gonna make it, if she's gonna make it. And then to see that growth, that like by the third or fourth year now, not only have they're thriving and they're leaders of organizations, and they've stepped forward and they're advocating and they're making change, and then to see them graduate and some, I talked to a former student like that. I was like, when I saw you, like, remember you were in my office all the time, and you were, in there complaining or crying because, I did have one student, she would come in and she would be upset, like, they don't like me. And I'm like, who cares? And I mean, literally, I was like, yeah, you're not going to make it if you're worried about everybody liking you. But to see over that 4 years, that transformation, just by giving some support, helping her understand that she has words, that she has value, that just she was talented. And all of those things, and just to see the growth. And now, you see her as a leader in her profession. I mean, Dawn got graduate degrees and so forth. So, but I have, like I said, it's when it gets hard, that's when I think about it now sometimes, but not so much back then. But because and this was the one thing, and I guess I should just be honest about it too, that which really made it really easy. It was a company that, yes, once you got in the management track, they decided where to send you. Like you would really pick like 2 or 3 places that at the end of the day, and they usually would try to, send you to one of those locations. They had offices all over the country, and they would usually try to, but not always, and there was no guarantee. And you certainly no guarantee you're going to get your top choice. And I just didn't like that, since not having that. It's like, I at least want to have control where I decide to live. If I go to some place that's not a lot of us, right, that I made that choice, right? And then the other thing that I had seen during my short time there is that people who are really good, sometimes their reward for being good is they got sent, like they would go to a branch that had been struggling, they turn it around, and they just doing amazing things. And they would then send them off to another struggling place because they were good at that. And then somebody else got to come in and kind of reach that. You know what I mean? And I was like, that kind of stuff would really irritate me. Like, you put your heart and soul in and you're connecting with the community, you turn things around, and then they're like, okay, you spent 4 or 5 years here, we want to send you off to Teaneck, New Jersey now. So, it's like, yeah, that's just, I don't like anybody having that kind of control, especially over where I live. And then it's not only you, if you have a family, right? And it's also your family that impacts. Like, they're moving you every time. And I think it's even more important to be able to have considerations of those folks. So now that kind of made it easy for me too. When I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't want them telling me that I'm going to go someplace and that's my option. And if I don't, then I'm done, right? So it's like, no.
Yeah, and that also would be really difficult to not feel like you have autonomy over your life, like where you get to choose to live, because work's only one part. And I feel like it's so easy, particularly for people in our community, to become so passionate about our work, especially when you're working in the DEI space, because it's our livelihood, it's on the line. But like ultimately, you need to be able to nourish yourself outside of work and create the life that you want. So you don't want your employer to be like dictating where you're going, because it's like your life path. You're the one that wants to be able to carve that out. So yeah, that's wow. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, self-autonomy is really important. And so it's good that you stuck with that. And it was really good to hear about, those experiences from people that you've kind of been a mentor to, that were going through the motions, that, were at the university and struggling and worried about those outside perceptions of how people viewed them in the world. And as a leader in diversity and equity work for over 25 years in the higher ed space, would you be able to provide a pivotal situation in your life that significantly altered your career or caused you to reconsider your path that you were on? And what made this moment in your life memorable? Because I feel like, a lot of people have those moments where they're feeling down and, there's a pivotal shift where they're like, you know what, I can do this. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know that there is one situation that I can point to that caused me to reconsider my path. Some of the paths that led me to this work. I think I talked about it a little bit earlier. As a student, I was really involved on campus, and part of that, I became a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, one of the Divine Nine historically Black fraternities and sororities. And so certainly that got me engaged and active on the things that we were doing in the community, but doing on campus. It got me engaged in challenging things that we wanted to be better for Black students, and then that led me thinking about broader access and success kinds of issues. So I think I think that engagement was one of the things that drove me the most. But I did have an experience, excuse me, during 2015 and 2016 academic year, when I was at the University of Tennessee, and where I was an inaugural Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And you talk about the anti-DEI legislation and things that's taking place. But while I was there, some conservative groups manufactured controversies, and I say that intentionally. They manufactured controversies. The things I talk about, if I shared them, and it's a long story, probably much more there than we have time for. But if I shared them, you were like, what? Why? Yeah, but they were able to manufacture these controversies that led to it led to the Tennessee legislature passing a bill to defund my office, and the um, the university really didn't fight it, the leadership, and so because of how all of that played out, and like I said, this long story, I do long presentation on this, but because of how all that played out, the lack of support from senior leadership at the university, the lack of support from people that look like us. And I always say that too. I learned a lot through this because everybody's committed until it becomes, they really go down. Then it becomes about self-preservation. And so it's very interesting to watch. But also, I was really disappointed by some of the lack of national support. And after all that occurred, I thought about leaving this work. I really did. First of all, it was interesting. I thought that because of everything that happened, that it might be hard for me to stay in the work anyway, right? I never thought that it would be hard for me to become a finalist for a role. For example, I applied for 3 positions during that time. I was a finalist for all, not surprisingly, because if you think about search committees in higher education context, and I know Tiana in particular, you work with it, so like when you can pull a committee together for roles like this, there's going to be people who are passionate. They're really passionate about. For many of those people, I had become kind of this champion and this national figure who's really willing to put a line in the sand and not fold to legislators. I never apologized. I never bowed down. I never, and so I knew for those folks. So yes, they would move me forward as finalist. What I always expected that would happen is I'd get to those and get the campus interviews and things probably would go pretty well and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's the presidents and the chancellors who they make the decision, they make the appointment. And while everybody is committed, and I often have said over the years, rather, tongue in cheek, is that you'll never meet president, chancellor, dean who's not committed to diversity. And of course, and my point there is everybody says it, right? But when it gets hard, are they really? And are they going to really be there? And because of what had happened and how big it had got, this thing was international, and I kid you not, and just you need to Google it sometime. And me in the Tennessee legislature, and you'll see this thing that was easy for people to make it about me. And somehow, and some people did, including people that look like us, that it was about me, that I wasn't strategic, I wasn't savvy. I mean, all of these things when that wasn't it. And now they see. And I try to get people at the time to understand. It's like, this isn't, and people at Tennessee would tell you, and actually there's articles. I got one that I kept in my office, and it says in there, it's the Tennessee paper, Knoxville Sentinel, saying, Hall said always, don't worry about him. It's not about him. He will be all right. I always said that. I said, it's about this work, and will we be able to continue to do it and do it with integrity? And I said to the people at Tennessee, I said, I'm going to be all right because I had faith and confidence in who I am. I'm going to be all right. But will you all continue to be able to do this work? And, they can say that they have an office. You're not doing it really. You're not doing it really with real integrity because the legislators are telling you not to do certain things, and you bet not do it, right? Or you know what's going to happen, right? So, and that was just nationally, not that we could have slowed what has occurred since then, and 23 states and counting. Not that we could have prevented it, but maybe we could have slowed it a bit. Maybe we could have, and at least been proactive in getting out and trying to tell the why of why this work is so important. So that was something that occurred that almost caused me to reconsider staying in this field.
Wow. That really spoke to me. And I wanted to see if you could dive a little deeper on that because, you're absolutely right. A lot of people are dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion or, advancing the Black community until it comes to self-preservation or maybe going against the grain at some of these large institutions and really standing up or defending people in the workplace that have experienced racism. And I know in some experiences, some people end up getting soured by that. And they're like, why would I continue to, work in DEI when people don't stand up for me? Or why would I should just worry about myself and go make my money and do my thing. Why am I going to spend my energy fighting for the Black community when they didn't stand up for me? And so can I ask you, how did you maintain that integrity and that passion for the work, even when at times you may have felt abandoned by your own community?
Yeah, and it was interesting that I had such broad support from students in particular and faculty. It was really administration at the campus. And it was so initially when I was going all through it and people were saying to me, get out, right? And it's like, no, because if you see those pictures of students laying on the ground and protest, it's just a lot. And I was like, no, to have that kind of support, I'm in it. I'm in it to the end with them. And it wasn't until it was a bunch of stuff that happened that finally, all the gaslighting and stuff that was happening. And one of my mentors said after a conversation we had where it was so much that it became kind of crazy making. And that I said, well, perhaps maybe I did do something wrong. And she's like, what? You got to get out of there. You got to get out of there. And so it was then that I started to be open to other things. But even as I was in the back of my mind, I was like, should I stay with this? But what allowed me to, as I went, applied for those positions, I said to myself, as I'm interviewing, even though they're interviewing me, I'm interviewing them. I only want to be at a place where the leader has a demonstrated commitment. I don't want to hear just the words. And so I'm going to dive deep. I want to know what have they done, not what others have done, because often if you listen to people, they'll talk about people like me and what my office. And no. I want to hear about you and things that you have done specifically in the professional realm. But even I want to hear some personal stories too. I mean, that will help. So, because one of the things that I'd learned, because right now, even in the fields, you'll hear people and they'll talk about they only want to work at certain kind of institutions or certain locations. Like for me, the thing for me is more than location, more than mission, is who's the leader. Who's the leader and where's the commitment around this work? So I was having in-depth conversations. I still remember what Anamar, with President Kase, the conversation that we had. We got in depth about what had happened, what was happening to me at the University of Tennessee, what was going on, and she acknowledged that many of those issues, they would never be an issue at the university. It wasn't just because of who we are, where we are, and our understanding of the work here. And she said that doesn't mean that there won't be challenges and things might not come up. And she said, we all have to be strategic around work and we have to make decisions and we got to work within certain parameters. She said, but I still remember this. She said, and even understanding, she's like, there could be something that would happen that would cause me to turn my keys over and walk away. And what that said to me is that she had some integrity around this, that she wasn't, some people, and I experienced when I was at Tennessee, some of those folks, they weren't leading, they were operating from a place of fear, and it was that they would do anything to preserve their positions. They were doing it and they were trying to do it. And so we that helped me. So that was the important piece for me. And even as I think about people saying and ask me, will I continue in this work? Will I stay in higher education? Some people, I don't know. I don't know. We're going to be getting a new president. I don't know. We will see. I hope whoever comes in has the same kind of commitment that President Kase does, that they will provide the same kind of support for the work. And certainly, even now, more than ever, in all this anti-DEI legislation and stuff that's taking place, that they're not operating from a place of fear. I don't want to be in an environment where we're being risk averse. Yes, we got to be smart. We got to live within legal parameters and all of those kinds of things. But I also think it's an opportunity for us to lean in and be creative and innovative to make sure we can preserve the core of the work. And that's what I want from a leader. And so as long as I have it, I can do it. And I will also say, Brad, I want to be honest too that I learned a lot through that experience again about myself because everybody says what they'll do, and I tell people you don't know until you're in it. And I like see people, a lot of people. What I had opportunities, I could have still been there. They wanted me to throw certain people under the bus, to promise not to work on certain issues and not work with certain communities. And I said no, and I said no. I gotta have integrity. I said when I look in the mirror, because I remember one of the leaders there saying, "Well, we're asking you to do less. We're not cutting your salary, actually." So blah blah blah. I said, "It's not about that. I got to be able to look in the mirror and like myself. I was like, I gotta be able to have some integrity around the work." And so I, that was I learned that about myself, but I also, like I said, I learned about other people. And I will say, I have work and I have an agenda, things I'm trying to move, and people always come forth with others and other things. And it's not that those things aren't important. Again, I have only so much capacity. And if it's really important, often what I will say to people, because what I learned about people there, and it happens here too. People want other people to carry their water. They want them to do their work. And okay, if that's important, I'll say, okay, that's right. Are you willing to lead? I'm willing to walk alongside you. And people are like, not my job. I'm not. Well, that tells me everything. You know that this is hard. You know that this is hard and it's going to be hard. So, that's some of the stuff that could be troubling, that you want to put me out there. You want to put the prisoner out there. And not again, yeah, we are in these roles and we need to lead and take. But again, like I said, I have work that I've been working on behalf of students, on behalf of others. I'm driving. I'm one person. I'm saying that not that what you bring forward isn't important. Don't have the capacity right now, but even with that, I'm willing to walk alongside you and maybe even help figure it out. But you're gonna have to lead some of this. And people often, when I find it again, like they're not do it because they know it's hard. And so one of the things I've had to say to myself, you can't take it on. You can't take on all of it. You can't do all of it by yourself. And if others aren't willing to walk with you, then I'm taking on the things that I have the most passion about, and that's and the bandwidth for. Now that doesn't mean that things don't change over time, and something that might not emerge that I have to redirect effort, and that will happen. I don't worry about the critiques like I once did. I used to worry more about it. But and I'll hear little things here about what people saying, and because I know those very same people, I gave the example one time about when and this still is an issue certainly around DACA after DACA was done away with, and there's been lots of concerns about ICE and other things coming to campus. There was harsh critiques from some folks I was hearing, and I said to folks, I don't let it bother me, because for those very same people, if ICE did come to campus, they would be the ones in there saying, I can't be arrested. I got kids. I got this. You're like, wow. I guarantee you, Rickey Hall would be flying down to wherever and would be probably getting arrested. See on television, getting arrested. There's no need to talk about it, right? It's like I'm gonna do it in my actions, and so that's the other piece of, like, I'm not trying to prove it to folks. People can have their critiques. They're going to always have their critiques. And I think you will continue on in your career journey. You're going to see, no matter what you do. And sometimes it's from the folks you're doing the most for, right? Or working the hardest on behalf. And it's hard to, people often say don't personalize it, and I'll say that, but it's hard not to. But you just got to keep doing it because it's the right things to do.
I just want to commend you first off for how you handled that experience. I cannot imagine the mental turmoil that you were going through during that time where you're being told that you're not performing or you're causing, all this tension when you were trying your best to continue to advance these efforts and were so committed to it. But I can't even imagine how you were able to get through that. So, yeah, I just thank you for that and sharing that story. And I also was hoping you'd be able to talk a little bit more about what it means to have people actually walk alongside of you when you are working in the DEI space. You talk about that. You don't want to just hear the flowery, sayings, the DEI statements and the initiatives. Like you want to actually hear what are the tangibles that these people are doing in these leadership positions. So if you could share your insight about that, what does it really look like for allies, self-proclaimed allies, to actually walk and do the work alongside of those that are marginalized and in our community?
Yeah, and I know that is so important. I mean, when you talk about allies, and one of the things I sometimes cringe, by the whole ally notion, but it's important, and it has been important to some communities, really important to some communities. But the reason I cringe sometimes is because I'll hear people say that I'm your ally. I'm like, are you really? And it raises the question about who gets to choose, right? And I really think I will. You don't have to tell anybody or tell me. I'll be saying that, right? And I think to be a real ally, because I think people do things, but it's the things that they want to do, and that's comfortable for them. And then they'll say, based because I did that, I didn't need you to do that. Ask me what I need you to do, or what would be helpful. And now that's when you see where people are, because you start to see faces get tight. Yeah, because it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be hard, but those are the important things that we need to do if we're going to really lead this work. So I'll answer your question in two kind of ways. One is how we tackle some of this at the university. We have our DEI framework, the diversity blueprint. And I intentionally call it a framework because we're a large, complex place, and we have to have something that is applicable to all of our three campuses, all the colleges and schools here on the Seattle campus. And every college and school is in a different place, every administrative unit when it comes to DEI, right? So if you look at those goals, those are really broad goals. And what I've said, then it's my expectation that every college, school, every administrative unit, that they then have DEI action plans, strategic action plans that are in alignment with the diversity blueprint. Because then that's where, again, because we're aligning work, and that's where plans are more prescriptive, because so you look at it and it'll tell you who doing what by when. It's hard to do that, at this big complex place from a high level, like for me to do that for everybody, right? For lots of reasons. But it should be done at the unit level. So that's approach that we use there, and working closely with the leadership, with the president, the chancellor, the provost, the deans, the other VPs, and so forth, and then strategically working together when issues arise. So this is the one thing that I appreciate about here more so than any place that I've worked. And I've worked at 5 institutions, 3 flagships institutions. And the thing that I can honestly say here is that we work as a leadership, we work very closely, much more closely to address some of these difficult issues and challenges that come up in general across the board, no matter what they're, but also when it comes to DEI, that these things that are coming up, we're in the room together talking about how we're going to approach it, how, if there's a message, the messaging around that and all of that. And one of the things that I have said to the president often is I really appreciate her. And you notice, you all have been on campus and in and around the campus. When there have been statements often about things, and almost always they come from her. And I can tell you that's not the case always. Other places that when things happen, especially of a diversity nature, they often want folk like me to jump out in front because no matter what you say, it's never. I tell people, while it's necessary, I'm not the biggest fan of messages. I would just say, just because I know sometimes they are needed, and you got to acknowledge. It would seem tone deaf not to acknowledge. But I know that they're unsatisfactory almost all because almost always people want you to take a definitive, and especially if there are multiple parties or like it feels like there are sides, which I hate. Often people trying to make us feel like we got to take a side, and like as an institution with folks from all walks of life. I mean, and there are some things that are morally reprehensible, and we know you gotta. But in general, like on some of these issues, like it's dicey, and depending on what you said, and trying to figure out. And I think that's more as a higher education institution, we have to be able to engage and be curious and help our students and others be curious and learn more about. And even where there are these strong differences, we got to be able to see the humanity in the other. And I just think that we have gotten away from that ability that, and I see it happens to me sometimes, even with Black students, Black faculty. If I disagree with you, I'm dead to you, because you're no longer. And I'm like, oh, but what about the 90% of things that we agree on? Or all this work we've done in the past, is that not just because on this one issue, we need to talk about and why, maybe find out the why I disagree. And I need to figure out where you are. But when I say walk alongside, like sometimes it's again like asking the question, what's needed, how we show up, how I can support. I know, and sometimes in positions of leadership, what people don't understand is sometimes you're dealing with these same issues that others are, while you still have to. I'm not gonna. Well, I was gonna say curated burden, but I'm not gonna say burden because I think in some ways it's an honor. But to be there to support, certainly my team, sometimes other faculty and staff members, leadership, but certain students who are impacted, that we gotta hold space, support when you're going through your own thing. So sometimes it almost it makes it hard for you, at least in public ways, in real time, to really show all the things that you're going through because you got to shift, almost compartmentalize to focus on what's needed on campus. And an example of that I will share was like going after George Floyd's murder. And I don't know, some people know, but I don't know if you all know, but I spent 15 years at the University of Minnesota and in the Twin Cities, and was deeply steeped in that community, knew exactly where it was that George Floyd was murdered, that third precinct where that, they kind of set on fire. I knew all of that, those spaces and places. So when I would see the images, I knew right away. When I would see people in the community, I knew a lot of those people, a lot of the community leaders. I was on the phone quite often with folks. One of my best friends right now, he is the CEO of a large nonprofit that is right in that serves that neighborhood, 2 blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered. Intimately there, we talk. He's on the George Floyd Foundation, on their board actually. So we talk a lot. One of my fraternity brothers and close friends is a state legislature Minnesota state legislator that does a lot around racial justice and policing. And so, of course, I'm in this, but at the same time, I'm meeting with and holding space with students, in particular Black students that's in trauma. And I mean, that was extremely difficult, and what would have been great. I still reflect on all these colleagues that are so, and I shouldn't say that because I sound like I'm making judgments, but to tell me of their respect for me, their support for the work, their deep commitment, and not to hear people calling or stepping forward. How can I help? How can I support? What can I do? How can I work alongside you to support, so you're not shouldering all of the, those things. I think that's ways that people can help. And then also when there are issues that I guess issues are being brought forth all the time, and people want me to take them on. And um, am I even begin? I was about to give you an example, but I'm not going to do that because but there, it's a lot, and like that's not, for one, some of those things aren't my particular expertise. Not, I understand. I think they're important. Um, but I have a whole load of other things, a full plate that need to be working on. And when I'll say, okay, if you're willing to take this on or lead or work with others, I'll work alongside. I'm going to make time, I'm going to give effort, I'm going to try to direct resource. But then I have people, get really upset. It's like, oh, well, before I used to I would really think a lot about, and then I'm like, well, oh, well, like I can only do what I can do. And it's not that I'm just turning people down in one way. I'm saying this is a way to get it done. And if it's really that critical to you, you should be willing to step forward and help lead, right? Or help walk alongside at least. But I think those are important things because, you all have heard me in talks that I've given. I always talk about, if this is truly institutional value, that this work should be everybody's everyday work, that we all must live, we all must lead where we can, because we all have spheres where we can influence and help move forward. But often I think it's easy for people to sit back and point to what others should be doing and not look at what we should be doing. So I will ask people that sometimes, and I know people feel it like I'm deflecting, or in some way they get ticked off with it. No, but I'm just asking you, what can you do from where you are? And maybe beginning there. And if you make your environment that you're in, your office space, the you're in, where your colleagues, if you begin to make that better and there changes, doesn't that begin to change the university? And if we all have that tact, well, that's the only way we're going to transform the university. If you wait on one leader or a couple, it's not going to happen. Too large, too complex. Lots of different things happening. We can't see everything every day, right? So
that's all really great. And yeah, I mean, wow, it's everyone's work. So it takes a collective effort, like you said, and people also being accountable and understanding their positionality, because a lot of times people say that they do want to help, or that, they're aware of the issues, but they don't actually want to assess how they've contributed to some of that harm, or how they can actually get involved to further these DEI efforts. So on that point, I did want to transition a bit to some of that DEI legislation that you had discussed. And it's appalling that in 2015 that you were undergoing these similar efforts, and now it's 2024, almost 10 years later, and we're still in this same position. But DEI legislation has affected 164 college campuses in 23 states as of June 2024, according to a recent article in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Some of these changes have resulted in the dissolution of multicultural and identity-based spaces, the elimination of diversity grants, positions, and offices, along with banning mandatory diversity training and the use of diversity statements in hiring decisions. At a time where there is a national campaign against DEI efforts across the American higher education as institutions, what do you think is the most critical response to combat these efforts? And what do you believe are the adverse effects of DEI opponents' strategies on society and future generations? Please let me know if you need me to repeat any of that. It was very loaded. So
I think that important question. There's a lot there. And while some would like universities and people in roles like mine to address specific legislation, I don't think that approach will be effective. And I think we should articulate the why. I started talking a little bit about this in earlier comments, but I do think one of the important things that we can do is really talk about the why for the work. why it is important to higher education institutions, how having diverse students, faculty, and staff makes us more excellent institutions, how it drives discovery, which then leads to breakthrough discoveries and innovation. And those are the things that higher education institutions say they're about. And so we need to really talk more about those things, how having a diverse workforce leads to healthier people and communities, and how this works benefits everyone. I think that's the piece we don't get to, that we don't start to help people understand why. And we've allowed people to um, um, really take the narrative and spin it in a way that now DEI has become this evil kind of thing, and where people really don't, they reframed it, where, you ask people and the things that they give you. I've seen a poll, they'll ask people who really don't fundamentally understand. So what's DEI? It's and they'll say it's critical race theory, or so, sort of these sound bites, right? And some of that is just because we haven't done a good job of articulating, and we need to do more about that. Offices like mine, the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity here, we need to talk more about our value, especially to getting students through, including low income and first generation whites, students who were previously in foster care, rural students, and so forth, getting them through to graduation. We have had huge impact in that area, where we've been doing this work. We're in our 56th year now. We, Emil Petrie wrote the book about our 50th anniversary, where he was documenting that 50-year history of impact. I think we should be intentional about how our work helps to address national priorities, like national security, economic vitality, workforce development, and so forth, and intentional to tie into things that, that's important for the nation as a whole, because it is. And lastly, I think we should be calling on our corporate and industry supporters to do the same. If having a diverse workforce is important to them, then they should be able to articulate why, to say why it makes them better. Companies can say to governors and legislators, if they continue to pass, or if they pass these anti-DEI bills, that they won't bring new companies there or headquarters. I think about when Amazon was looking for, it was HQ2, their second headquarters in the U.S., and all of these, everybody wanted them in their community, and why? And I'm going to say, and I hope some of the people here too, I was a little disappointed that they didn't use that as a way to say, we don't want to be in these anti-DEI kind of states, because we are an international company. In order to attract the best, we need people from the globe. And we know that diversity adds to excellence and leads to more productivity. They should have been able and then leverage that more. And but there are a lot of these states where they passed this anti-DEI legislation that really were lobbying hard for them to come. Those are opportunities. And so it's always interesting to me is that I get lots of calls from folks in the corporate sector, or wanting access to students that we serve in OMA&D, and because they want to diversify their workforce. And it's like, you work with such great students, excellent students. We would like to get out. Well, then tell the story, tell why. Tell why, make sure that it's important that places like the University of Washington able to continue to educate these students in focused ways, because we know not everybody has had the same opportunity. And sometimes people need a little more support to realize their full academic potential in a space like a University of Washington. So I would say that it's been one of the most frustrating things to me has been to see so many companies and organizations give in to anti-DEI legislation or threats about lawsuits without any fight, including law firms. And any firm, like, you're one of the best law firms in the country, and you just roll over. And it just calls the question for me, and I know people might see this and take notice and be upset and oh well, because I'm just being truthful. And when I wear a stand, that it does call the question to me: were you ever committed? If so, why is it so easy to roll over? And so now I talk more and less about commitment and about conviction. I don't want just your commitment. Those are where I want the conviction. The conviction is that you stay with it. That's one of the things that, while I don't always agree with some of these conservative groups, but the things that are important to them, they stay with it. Don't matter. And they lose a legal battle, they lose this. Another strategy.
They're persistent for sure. Oh yeah, and they're vocal.
They're vocal, and they come back with new strategy, right? They just go away for a while. 5 years later, they got it was like, as we've seen, they've introduced their model legislation. I mean, why is it so easy? And why aren't we doing similar things on the DEI if it's as important as people have said over the years? So I'll stop, because you can tell I can get going on that. But in terms of adverse effects, I think certainly beyond the fear that it causes, and it's intentional fear, and especially to underrepresented, marginalized communities and those working to advance the work, that's really intentional. But beyond that, it inhibits all the things that I spoke about a bit earlier: a diverse workforce that leads to greater innovation. It inhibits our ability to address some of the most pressing societal issues and challenges. It impacts our ability to prepare our graduates to live and lead in an increasingly diverse and global world. And if we are going to be effective and thriving communities, people must be able to work across differences for a common good. And this is where people learn some of those skills, and we need to be able to do that work here. We can't do it in higher education institutions. Where will it happen?
You can listen to part 2 of this episode now. Thank you so much for listening to Identity Unboxed.
We are so grateful for your support, and thank you for listening to Identity Unboxed.
Authenticity is your guide to cast an impact on the world that you will be proud of. Signing off with pride, Tiana
and Brad.
Thank you so much.